Oh, welcome back. I'm talking to Bonnie Yates about a question that we had yesterday, not yesterday, last Wednesday, that we had Evelyn Kung answer because it was a question that part of it might be legal, but part of it was behavioral. And anyway, Bonnie Yates is with us. Let's start from there. The fabulous Bonnie Yates. And we lost your video, Bonnie.
Yeah, I know. What's happening? Let me figure that out. Okay, hold on. I see what happens.
All right, so she's going to work on... Well, there we have Bonnie.
Got me back.
Yay! And
here I am.
For those of you who watch the show on a regular basis, Bonnie's with us now on Mondays. This segment we call Your Rights, because your rights matter. And Bonnie is a special education attorney. It is IEP season. And we know that a lot of you are going through a lot of different things as you get your IEPs done. Bonnie is coming to us from the law firm of Hirji and Chow, and we are getting some sort of a crackling noise, though, Bonnie. And
that's probably the scarf against the headset.
All right. But in any case, Bonnie, talk to us a little bit about Hirji and Chow, and give us your legal disclaimer, please.
Okay. So Hirji and Chow is a special education and disability discrimination law firm. We're located in Culver City, California. Our phone number is 310-391-0330, and our website is www.lawyer4, that's number 4, lawyer4children.com. And we're trying to educate everybody about all these legal rights that we have that we don't even realize we have, so that you can use them effectively when you need to interact with your school district. It's not a substitute for specific legal advice about a specific problem. If you live in Southern California, we'll be happy to do an intake with you and give you some more focused advice. If you're elsewhere, we recommend that you look at the COPA website, www.copa.net. There's really no substitute for talking to an attorney in your own state who's well-versed in special education matters, so you can figure out what to do about your child's situation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bonnie. And we know that... Yes.
Shannon, before we jump in, I wanted to say, IEP season has sort of manifested in a strange way this spring. Maybe I'm just not remembering, but the energy in the air is just frantic, and parents are feeling really, really stressed, and we're feeling the stress too. So I took a step back and I said to myself, what is causing this? And I think what's causing it is it's the end of the school year. People are very panicked that they aren't going to be able to move to the next step in their action plan because the school year's ending and there's no ability to do an IEP for 3 months. So what I wanted to say about that is, even if that is the case, oftentimes there's a lot that can be done over the summer. And so, if you have a proper case plan and you have the steps laid out, in theory you should be able to get whatever you need done before the end of the school year so that you can keep on moving in a linear fashion during the summer toward your next objectives. But that experience for parents is just so hard on top of everything they're already dealing with. And it's hard for us too, because we feel it coming from you. So, it's a bit odd that we have a system where we have no IEPs over the summer. I mean, we have classes over the summer. There's extended school year. Assessments by private evaluators occur over the summer. Due process hearings occur over the summer. So I hate to say it, but, we probably need to move to a year-round system of doing IEPs as well.
Yeah. And I think it's probably going to take a lot of parents lobbying for that. But I think it's one of those arbitrary things that they probably put in place many years ago, don't you, Bonnie, where they just were like, well, we don't have staff during the summer, so we're not going to do this. And that isn't the case anymore. Staff is there all summer long.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was supposed to be based on summertime being a vacation. And if you subpoena witnesses for a due process hearing in the summertime, the school district will still try to get the case continued and they will say it's an inconvenience and it's costly for them because they have to bring people in and pay them extra. So we use that actually tactically to our advantage. Like, we really like it when things get scheduled during the summer because we can do it and they can't. They really don't want to.
Right.
So that's just something that occurred to me today while we were getting ready to get started.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that so much. We talked a little bit about there was a question last Wednesday. Evelyn Kung answered it from the behavioral standpoint. We said to the parent, write back to us if this doesn't work, because it will become a legal thing at some point if this doesn't work. So I wanted to touch base with you on this, but then we want to have a few minutes to talk about LRE. So basically, this mom wrote in and said there's a 9-year-old going to public school, and he's been having a really hard time for the last couple of months. He's been hitting, scratching, kicking, biting teachers and himself, destroying school property, and saying bad words. The parent went to observe herself and said that she felt bad, that she felt that most of the time it was that he was aggravated by something. And that even at home, he says that he wants to bite himself, that he's having self-regulation issues. They've been trying to work on it a bunch of different ways behaviorally. And basically, the principal has said if this doesn't stop, that they're going to suspend him. Now,
yeah, well, that's totally improper, and I'm interested that he said that. My first question is the student had any medication change? Is he on medication? If he's not, even without hypothesizing about the clinical reasons that he might be acting out in these ways, that's, you don't punish the person for having a behavior problem. You do a functional behavior assessment, and you figure out the underlying causes of the behavior, and you come up with a plan for how you're going to manage that behavior and redirect the child into more pro-social behavior. So that's an off-the-cuff remark from a frustrated principal. But if you suspended him for that, that would be. I mean, I guess you could suspend him. You certainly can't expel him. But then the response to that would be it's a denial of FAPE, because you failed to address in the area of behavior when there's a clear need that he needs a functional behavior assessment. So that's how I'd answer that.
Well, and that's thrilling, because what Evelyn said was the first thing you need to do is put in writing and ask for a functional behavior assessment from a board-certified behavior analyst, and that in order to do the functional behavior assessment on the behavior, so that a behavior intervention plan can be written and attached to the IEP. And we were saying that's what really needs to happen, but if the school in any way does not comply with that, then, and if they continue with moving forward with the idea of suspension, that then it becomes a legal issue. And that,
yeah.
and Evelyn said, they can't be penalizing somebody for something that is clearly in their diagnosis, and so in any case, I'm thrilled that we're all on the same page, Bonnie.
Well, the other thing is, we've covered this a little before, and maybe I need to give it to everybody again. You can Google it. The family's entitled to prior written notice. In other words, the family should ask why he's being suspended rather than having an assessment in the area of functional behavior, since the district has a duty to assess in all areas of suspected disability. And they should ask for prior written notice. The school district has to give them a written response stating the basis for their decision and the documents or things that they relied upon. So I think that the family should definitely ask for prior written.
Okay.
And the principal needs to understand that, if he goes through with the suspension, he might be buying himself a due process, which usually people don't want to do.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Okay.
So, and then we were going to talk a little bit about least restrictive environment.
Yeah. It's interesting, because one of the great things about doing the show for me, in addition to being able to interact with all the parents that you have, send questions into the show, is that I've been able to take like an hour a week or something, here and there, to actually really legally focus on the questions that people have. And that's just been great, because what I've found is there's a lot of stuff in the law that's really favorable to us. And, if people like me don't know it, and I think I should know it, but if I don't know it, then probably a lot of other, how should I expect the school staff to know these things if I don't know these things. So I'm trying to find my place where we left off last week, but while I do that, reading about this area of least restrictive environment was very interesting to me, because there's really so much stuff in the law that supports inclusion, and I don't hear it being talked about in this way at IEP meetings at all. The burden, as we discussed last week, is on the district to prove that it's offered the least restrictive environment, but that's not what happens. We have to go in and beg for little crumbs, like, oh, please let us have, a music class or something with general ed peers, and that's not the way it's supposed to work. The evaluation should start from, if you have a circle, that's like the pie, right? The pie should be, all cherry pie, and cherry pie is like general ed, and that's the presumption. And then if you're going to have like peach pie or pumpkin pie or something like that, it has to be a rational IEP team decision that justifies moving away from the presumption of LRE. So where we stopped last week was, was sort of giving people a theoretical explanation about the LRE mandate. And now we're going to get into some more specifics. And so, for example, do all of you know that the presumption is that the child should be educated in the same school that they would go to if they weren't disabled? So that not only means that there's a presumption in favor of general ed with supports and services, there's also a presumption that the child is going to attend school at his home school. That comes up sometimes.
You said that to me a year ago, Bonnie, and it like blew my mind, and I've been talking to parents about it ever since, and everybody's like, honestly, like, where exactly can we find this? Because everybody's like, I had no idea. And can I tell you, I was at an event last Friday that I went to, and I was talking to parents about what you had said last Wednesday about that the presumption is that they should be mainstreamed. And everybody's like, schools don't present it that way. And I said, I know, right? Like the whole idea of kids being mainstreamed, we all feel as though, and schools act as though, it's something we have to prove that they could succeed.
No. That we have the presumption on our side. The presumption is that the child will be educated in LRE. Now here's where we get into the nuances. This area has been litigated a lot. And I am told that for the most part, the decisions from the 50 states have been in favor of an integrated education with as much general ed as possible. So now I'm going to just read you some stuff for flavor. There's a presumption among the alternative programs of education and training required by the statute to be available. Placement in a regular public school class is preferable to placement in a special public school class. So the presumption is when the court looks at everything, the court looks at it through the lens of like, why can't we do it in general ed? And what would be needed to do it in general ed? And the cases are very clear that cost can't be a factor, administrative convenience can't be a factor. If you can make it happen in general ed without it creating undue burden on the teacher, and the student is learning enough in the classroom to justify, maybe more difficult curriculum, then you have to do general ed, or you have to do least restrictive environment. So the Supreme Court's comment on this in 1982, way back in 1982, was the act, that's the IDEA, requires participating states to educate handicapped children with non-handicapped children wherever possible. In California, the Federal Appeals Court stated that congressional preference for educating handicapped children in classrooms with their peers is made unmistakably clear. Another federal court found that denying access to regular public school classrooms could constitute discrimination. And when you start talking about discrimination, you're no longer talking about the IDEA. You're talking about Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and the ADA, and those statutes provide for money damages in the event of illegal discrimination. Furthermore, federal special education law requires school systems to supplement and realign their resources to move beyond those system structures and practices which tend to result in unnecessary segregation of children with disabilities. And I stopped and thought about that a lot, because I can count on, maybe like one finger in the 20 years I've been doing this, the amount of times there's been an inclusion facilitator brought in to actually make it happen. And so it's this, mainstreaming or full inclusion or partial inclusion in general ed requires open-mindedness, rolled up sleeves and a certain amount of creativity. And I think that people in public education mostly don't believe in this. I could be wrong. They're welcome to tell me that I'm wrong. So they go through the motions, and the motions are very ineffective. So, what we typically have are situations that just perpetuate the segregation. So you might have, like, kids being brought into another teacher's class for sort of a mainstream, lunchtime or activity. But if there's no interaction among the children, and that's what we see a lot, then it's no different than being in a segregated classroom. The burden is on the school district to prove that a student cannot be educated successfully in the regular classroom. So when you're being pushed into a special ed class that you don't want to be in, the thing to tell the IEP team is the burden is on you to prove that we can't do this with supplementary aids and services in the general ed classroom. What are your reasons? The Act's strong presumption in favor of mainstreaming would be turned on its head if parents had to prove that their child was worthy of being included rather than the school district having to justify a decision to exclude the child from the regular classroom. That's a case from the Third Circuit that was talking about the right to be mainstreamed. In California, we had a big decision in 1992. It was Rachel Holland versus Sacramento. And in that case, parents attempted to have their daughter mainstreamed into, I believe it was like a kindergarten or first grade classroom, and the school said no, it would put an undue burden on the school. She'd be too disruptive. She wasn't going to learn enough. And the court came up with a balancing test that determines when you do or don't get to be fully included in the general ed classroom. So because of LRE, Holland says the presumption imposes a burden on the school district to prove that a child cannot be mainstreamed. And the balancing of factors looks at the educational benefit of each setting, the non-academic benefit of interacting, which the courts have said is important, that's not trivial, the effect on the classroom, and you look at disruption and undue consumption of time. It's not enough that the student takes more of the teacher's time. It has to be undue burden or undue consumption of time. And they can look at cost, but I haven't really seen too much that actually does talk about cost, even though I think cost is really the reason they object to full inclusion in part. What you need to be able to show is no undue burden and satisfactory educational progress. And the bar for, or the proof that you're required to show for satisfactory educational progress is not high. You have to make some educational progress. And that would be determined by your IEP goals, and that's why it's so important that you know how to write an IEP with appropriate goals for mainstreaming, because as long as you're meeting your educational goals, in the early grades particularly, they're not going to be able to say you aren't getting educational benefit out of it.
Now, Bonnie, is that a good place for us to pause, because we're just about out of time?
Yeah, we could stop here.
Okay.
We could talk next time about how you balance and how you write an IEP for people so that they get the benefits of the least restrictive environment. That was where we were going next.
Okay, cool. And I'm wondering, for parents who are enlightened to this information, a lot of times then they'll come back and say, well, where do I find exactly what Bonnie just said to us? Like finding out that the presumption should be...
I'll send you the chapter from which I borrowed heavily.
Okay.
And you can share it with them. I think it's well researched and well written.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I'll send that.
We appreciate that, Kitty. Okay, cool. Very cool. Thank you so much, Bonnie. Give us again the information about Hirji Chow.
Okay, Hirji Chow, 310-391-0330, lawyerforchildren.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll look forward to talking to you next week. Hey, Hey, thanks for watching Autism Live. To subscribe, click here. And if you'd like to check out some more of our videos, click here.